Hello and welcome to All Things Women's Health. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stroud. I'm an obstetrician, gynecologist. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a small business owner. I'm a grandfather. I'm a Catholic. I'm a lot of things. But today on this show, I'm your host as we talk about all things women's health. It doesn't matter if it's from childbirth to infertility, pregnancy to menopause, or personal trainers to homeschooling. If it involves women and their health, it's on our agenda. Joining me today is a simply remarkable woman whose remarkable story I know is going to touch you in numerous ways. Her name is Shelby Eicher, and she is by any measure an amazing woman, wife, mother, and much more even than that. Her story is going to be one of loss, of suffering, of disappointment, of triumphant, of surprise. And I'll tell you now, you have to listen till the end because the ending is not what you think. More than anything, her story is one of a mother's heart. So get comfortable as we get to know more about this remarkable woman and the life-changing story of her pregnancy journey. We'll be right back with All Things Women's Health. Welcome back to All Things Women's Health, and welcome Shelby Eicher.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having the courage to come on and tell your story. Not just everybody wants to do that. So as I teased in the intro, your story is a complex one, and it's got a lot of turns and a lot of twists. Yeah. And so let's just start, because I know part of the story because I've been blessed to be your physician from time to time during this journey. But let's go way back to the beginning, even before you met your husband. Go ahead.
So I had my daughter, Paisley, in 2015, and at the time, I didn't know he would be my future husband, but Aaron was at the hospital when she was born and saw her after, so he's been there since day one. And then fast forward, we got married in July of 2017, and we then experienced our first miscarriage.
Now, did you want to be pregnant right away after marriage?
I was excited to be, yeah.
So I'm sure you're freshly married. You have a 1.5, 2-year-old. Yeah. You're excited. You get pregnant. You think, this is perfect. And then?
Yeah, I was very naive, thinking nothing would go wrong. But we miscarried.
As you think back about that miscarriage, it's been a while, but do you remember those feelings, and what was that like to miscarry right after getting pregnant, right after getting married?
It was very hard, and there were so many emotions because I wasn't expecting it. We had heard baby's heartbeat, so it was just a hard emotional time. But I really leaned on my husband, and I do think that it helped us become closer.
Yeah, that's particularly hard, I think, because in cases like yours, you didn't have any experience being married.
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot of experience to lean on in terms of a long relationship. So right out of the gate, you guys had to deal with crisis.
Yeah.
That's challenging.
Yeah.
You know, do you remember, in thinking back, maybe the better moments of the miscarriage and the lesser moments of the miscarriage? And when I say that, I think about people like me on the healthcare side of the story. What was that like in your memory?
At that time, I was with a different provider, and there was not any support, really. We didn't know what we were doing, walking through that, and I don't feel like we had anybody walking with us.
Yeah, I don't think that's an uncommon feeling. I think a lot of women in their early loss sort of experiences will describe just sort of feeling kind of invisible.
Yeah.
Does that come to mind?
Yeah, and definitely it felt like most people didn't understand that hurt because it wasn't a baby we held or
I like to remind people that even if the world tells you that what you just went through is not the loss of a child, your heart knows it, which is why you feel so horrible. Yeah. But I think we create a conflict
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, well, if this is no big deal, why do I feel like it's a big deal?
Right.
And that conflict, I think, makes it even worse.
Yeah. And then you grieve the dreams that you had and the hopes. And, at this month we were supposed to be a family of 4 kind of thing. And those are the dates that you remember, but
sure.
everybody else.
So that was in 2017. A little bit of time goes by, but not much.
Yeah.
And pick up the story.
We were pregnant again, and we delivered our baby at 27 weeks. And she lived for a month and then passed away. And that was a hard journey.
It had to
and
be.
In the first year of marriage, that was just a lot.
I don't think anybody could describe that as less than a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe give listeners a better sense of the pregnancy with your daughter. How did the pregnancy go, and how did you come to the 27-week birth?
Yeah, so the pregnancy was completely normal up until our 20-week anatomy scan.
Yeah.
And they thought that her arteries in her heart were switched.
Right.
So then we got sent to a high-risk doctor, and we were down at IU Health every week getting an ultrasound. And they thought that there was a hole in her heart at one point. So we knew we needed to deliver down at Methodist, down in Indy. And the day that I actually delivered her, I hadn't felt her move all day, and that just wasn't like her. She was very active. And so I was constantly on the phone with the doctors, and I tried all the things. And at that point, I just told Aaron, I'm like, we need to just go in. So we did, and they struggled to find her heartbeat. And so it was an emergency C-section. He got her out in 2 minutes.
To interrupt you, so it wasn't a planned. You weren't driving down with the intention to have your daughter that day. Once you got there, these things developed, and you had to move quickly and have a C-section.
Yeah, and I should say we actually ended up delivering in Fort Wayne. We weren't even at the hospital. We
That
were
was the plan,
supposed to be out. Yeah. So we were here for a week. She was in the NICU, and then she got flown down to Riley's.
Yeah.
So, and then we spent 3 weeks there with her before she passed away.
And did you know during those 3 weeks that her chance of survival was very limited, or was it touch and go, or what was it like then?
Yeah, we were very naive with the NICU world. They say it is a complete NICU world. They run it. She did very well at first. She was barely even on any oxygen. And then you had good days and you had bad. But we were very naive until right before she passed away. We were told that there were 2 syndromes she might have, and they were going to do genetic testing. And I looked both of them up on my own, which you should be careful doing. But I knew neither of them were going to be good, and we had a long road ahead of us either way. But we didn't even get those results until after she had passed away. So she had gotten neck, and she got it a second time and just couldn't fight it off.
Yeah, listeners, that's sadly a common intestinal complication of premature babies, where the bowel is affected and begins to die, and the child becomes septic and infected, and then often doesn't survive, as you point out. But I know there's listeners thinking that they just can't imagine what that was like to not know. What do you remember about that time period? What were those feelings like then?
I struggled with the fact that I was afraid to love her too much because I was trying to guard myself. And that's when my husband was like, it's going to hurt either way. So we got to love her as much as we can and spend as much time. So that was one thing that I struggled with. Because once we learned that, I was just afraid to be hurt anymore.
How you had a 3-year-old roughly then too, your other daughter. What was that like, trying to divide your emotions, so to speak, between a healthy toddler and this critically ill
Yeah.
child in the NICU.
I felt so torn because it was flu season, so Paisley couldn't be there. So luckily we had gotten a room at the Ronald McDonald House, and my mom came up a lot and stayed there with my daughter Paisley. So I was constantly hopping back and forth
Sure.
because I felt like she needed me and I wanted to be with Austin in the hospital, and I just felt so torn. And then trying to keep things positive and happy for Paisley because she didn't understand exactly.
Sure.
It was hard to go from that to serious at the hospital.
Do you think she appreciated at the time that, that her sibling was very sick?
I don't think she even understood
Yeah.
how sick she was. She kind of saw the excitement from a little kid. She got to fly in a helicopter,
Sure.
and, we're getting to stay in a hotel kind of thing.
Yeah.
She was super excited about that stuff. I don't think she really understood.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, fortunately, most people will never know what it's like to have a child in the NICU, let alone not survive a NICU stay. But, if you were explaining that to listeners, especially to moms or maybe wannabe moms, how would you even begin to explain those feelings?
The NICU was hard. You feel isolated, especially if it is during a flu season,
Oh, sure.
and you're just up there. Not many people understand. It's kind of lonely, honestly, being up there and
Surrounded by very sick, very tiny
yeah,
babies.
and you don't understand everything, and but just ask lots of questions. That was my biggest thing, and being an advocate for your baby. I learned a lot of things being in the NICU
Now,
that I didn't expect.
not to wordsmith you too much, but
yeah.
when you say be an advocate for your baby, what are you thinking when you say that? Because I'll bet most people don't really understand what that means.
Yeah. It's okay to question why things are being done, or why can't we do this instead, and just asking those questions and making sure that you're making the best decision for your baby.
Yeah. I like the example when sometimes in a setting, a healthcare setting like that, the healthcare worker, I'll just say, will say, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Whereas they should say, here's what I'm recommending that we do.
Yes.
But the advocate mom would say, I need you to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure I want to go that way.
Yeah.
And they have the right to do that.
Yeah.
The responsibility to do that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. We questioned a lot of things.
Yeah.
We just didn't want her to be a guinea pig with some stuff. We wanted to make sure that we were doing the best thing for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, she passed.
Yeah.
And you and your husband mourned that.
Yeah.
Do you remember when it got better?
Yeah. Every day got, we grieved a lot, and we really leaned on each other, but every day, got a little bit better, and really just thinking about the future and dreaming about, what things would be in the future is really what helped for us. And then getting that next positive pregnancy test was probably the getting back to the high of.
Sure.
Yeah.
Was that part of your plan to be pregnant again soon?
I wanted to be, yeah.
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 And then how do you feel like the presence of your daughter Paisley affected you during that mourning, grieving time?
I think I needed her. I needed someone to live for, like she needed me, and I knew that, and I wanted to be the best mom for her.
Yeah.
So she really pushed me. So,
Wow. So not much time goes by.
Yeah.
And you and your husband survive this ordeal, and you decide we're going to do this again. Pick up the story there.
So then we got pregnant again, and we then found out that was an ectopic pregnancy. So my numbers weren't doubling. We knew something was off, my HCGs.
But first you knew you were pregnant, and I'm guessing you were pretty excited.
Very excited. Yeah.
Not thinking that there's anything wrong.
Yeah, surely nothing will go wrong.
Even though you had this pretty tough history of a loss and then
Yeah.
another loss.
Yeah.
But you get a positive pregnancy test.
Yep.
Life seems good.
Yeah.
And then what starts happening?
Well, and then I started bleeding, and I knew something was wrong. And then we found out it was ectopic, so I had surgery for that. And they were able to save my tube with that one.
Do you remember, I guess we should back up for listeners, an ectopic pregnancy, usually we use the word ectopic, we mean tubal pregnancy. Ectopic just means outside of the uterus, and in the overwhelming majority it's going to be in the tube. And the tube ruptures, and it can cause severe bleeding. It can cause death of the mother. It's a very serious condition. A lot of moms who suffer an ectopic pregnancy describe this bizarre feeling of, on the one hand, I'm sad that I'm having a loss, and now I'm afraid I'm in trouble, that my own health is at risk. Do you remember those feelings?
Yeah, I didn't understand the gravity of it right away until things really started in the ER moving real quick, and people were kind of freaking out, and I was like, well, maybe I should be a little bit more worried. But I did lose a lot of blood, they had told me. So it was scary, I know, for Aaron. He said, he was worried about losing me, where I was sad about losing the baby, but then it did shift my focus to me then, and staying strong, because I was like, I know I have Paisley, and I have a family
that needs you.
Yeah,
it is a bizarre kind of combination of feelings, I think most women will say. But so they operated on you. You didn't have to have your tube removed. So I'm sure you felt hopeful and positive to some degree about that. Again, not a lot of time goes by, and you find that you're pregnant again. And that's about when we met you at the Fertility Midwifery Care Center. So you're a new patient to us now with this very interesting past, and you find out you're pregnant. Pick it up there.
So this pregnancy ended up being a tubal as well, but it was unexpected because my HCG numbers were doubling. So I was like, things are good. This pregnancy is going to be good. Surely it won't happen again. And then it did. And at that point, I did lose my tube as well.
Let's talk through that. That discussion, what that was like for you to learn that this time I've lost half of my reproductive tract, you might say. Do you remember those feelings?
I remember feeling like this is it. We aren't going to be able to have more kids. And I knew I was told it wouldn't hurt our chances of getting pregnant again. But in my mind, I just couldn't believe how that wouldn't affect it. So I kind of thought, this is it.
I've lost a tube. I've had these losses. We're lucky we have one child. Let's move on. But there's more. So I lost that tube, and then found out I had endometriosis. So I had surgery to remove that. And then I really felt like I have two things stacked against me here. I'm missing a tube, and I have this. So that had to be overwhelming.
It was, especially when all I've wanted my entire life was to be a mom. I wanted 5 kids. I wanted, I had it all planned, but God had different plans. So that was hard to hear that. But then we got pregnant with our rainbow baby.
Now, in those moments, did you have fear of getting pregnant again? Did you have any reluctance? Because as listeners probably know, there was a risk of another ectopic. Because you had endometriosis, it doesn't selectively damage one tube generally. So you had a tube remaining, but the feeling was it could be damaged, and you're at a higher risk for an ectopic. Did you have discussions with your husband? Maybe we should be done. Maybe we shouldn't try this again.
I think he knew that I wasn't done trying because I just wanted more babies. But every time I got that positive pregnancy test, it was an excitement mixed with fear.
Sure.
Because you don't know how long you'll get to carry that baby. And it's hard to explain that fear. And really, I had it until the day I delivered all my babies. Yeah. Just wondering, are we going to make it to 40 weeks this time?
Do you remember being, I'll say, counseled, so to speak, by friends or by family that, Shelby, you're not good at this. You should stop?
Yes, but I ignored them. I knew what I wanted, and I was just going to pray about it. And I knew that God knew my heart and what I wanted. Yeah. So
that's beautiful. I've had through the years husbands contact me separately in situations like yours, and they said, my wife wants to be pregnant again. What do you think I should do? And most of the time, I think I've said, I think you should probably get out of the way, because if it's written on your heart to be pregnant again, I don't know that I've ever seen anything change that. Yeah. And it sounds like it was clearly written on yours.
Yeah.
So you get your nerve up. Oh, it didn't take much, it sounds like. Yeah. You convince your husband, we're going to do this again. Yeah. And you do. Not much longer after that, right?
Yep.
So now you're pregnant again. It's about 2020.
Yep.
And how does that go?
And that pregnancy was completely normal. I carried him 8 days over my due date, and that was my most normal pregnancy.
that one remaining tube did the job.
It did. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think you tried to have a vaginal birth because you'd had a C-section prior.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out.
No.
You ended up having another C-section.
Yep. So that was my third.
Do you feel like your VBAC ending in a C-section, did you feel a component of failure there, disappointment? Yeah. Do you even remember?
I did feel like that was something I had to grieve because I had always wanted a natural birth.
Sure.
I wanted to experience that. And so I did feel like I needed to grieve that. And sometimes I still wish that I had gotten that experience.
Yeah.
But I'm just glad that my babies were here safe. So
Yeah. So you had the C-section, and now you think, okay, we've got this.
Yeah.
We figured this out.
Yeah, nothing could go wrong.
But you're not done.
No.
So about a year goes by, and what happens then?
We had another miscarriage, and we actually had 2 then. And at that point, I just surrendered it all to God. And
you had 2 more miscarriages back to back after your repeat C-section, relatively closely together, right?
Yeah.
And when you say, because people mean different things, I know, when you say give it to God, was there a component of giving up, of surrender, or what were those feelings then?
Yeah, I just remember feeling like I have these 2 beautiful children here, and if that's all that God gives me, that's okay. And I finally accepted that.
Because that wasn't okay before.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. As much as I may have said it, I didn't believe it in my heart.
Yeah.
But, and then...
Now, was that a place of peace, or what was that like?
Yeah, a complete peace. I just knew that it's okay. This is, what God gave me, and I'm happy. And I'm going to just soak it all up.
That must be that peace that surpasses all understanding.
Yes. Yeah.
So you give up. We're not going to be pregnant necessarily anymore.
Yep.
And then somewhere along the way, you decided we're not going to be pregnant anymore, but our family's not full.
Yeah.
Talk about that decision and that part of the journey.
Yeah. So actually, after Austin had passed away, we talked about adoption, and so we started that journey. So that was a 4-year journey for us.
What, and of course, I know the answer to this question because I'm an adoptive parent, but what were those conversations like? Why adopt? Why not adopt? Should we adopt?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, we debated fostering, but I just didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know how that would be to take care of a child.
And then say goodbye, potentially.
Yeah, especially with all of our loss already. So I was kind of against it. I told Aaron, God's going to have to work on my heart if that's what he wants me to do.
Yeah.
But adoption was something that we both were just on board for.
Did you ever talk about adoption before you had your loss? Maybe even early in your marriage? Was that something that you guys considered?
No, not until after Austin had passed away.
And then, do you remember, was your husband initially in favor, not in favor, lukewarm?
About adoption? Yeah, he was on board right away. At first, when I brought up the topic, I didn't know how he would feel about it.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from moms, sure.
Yeah, but he was on board right away with it.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny, as an adoptive parent, I've been asked before, were you worried that you would love your adopted kids as much as your biological kids? Like you, I have both.
Yeah.
And I remember being asked that and not exactly knowing how to answer, because I would think to myself, well, I guess maybe I am worried about that. I hadn't thought about it until you asked me.
Yeah.
But then I heard someone say, ask a pregnant mother when she loved her baby. And I've asked pregnant moms that for years and years, and most of them would say, the second I saw that positive pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me later, when we saw our adoptive kids for the first time, that's what happened to me. It happened instantaneously. So fathers, if you're listening, let me just tell you, as an adoptive father, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
My biological kids might say I love my adopted kids more. And we could argue about that. So you decide this is the way to go, and you all start pursuing adoption. Now, there's open adoption and closed adoption and infant adoption and international adoption.
Yeah.
Walk us through that whole decision process.
So we decided to go domestically in the United States.
Yeah.
And we did infant adoption is what we were looking for. So that journey started actually before we had our son. We had started that journey, and when we got pregnant with him, we went on hold with our agency. But we had a lot of ups and downs with that as well. We had lots of birth mothers that we talked to, and then they decided to parent, or we had one that miscarried. So that was almost a sense of loss as well. Kind of getting your hopes up, and then it didn't work out. So that was a long road too. But we finally found a couple days after I surrendered everything, and I was happy with my two and thankful. And a couple days later, we got a call that there was a baby girl waiting for us to come pick her up.
And you'd been there before, though, so I'm sure you had some trepidation about this.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous. I couldn't wait to it was a different state, so we had to drive there.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get there and meet the birth mom and really talk to her, see the baby and everything.
So at that point, you had a healthy toddler, post-to-toddler.
Yeah.
You'd been through unimaginable pain with the loss of a child in the NICU. You'd had losses that threatened your life, and you'd sort of given up. And then decided to adopt and had more losses. And then you go to see another baby. Yeah. Help us try to imagine what that felt like. Were you guarded? What were you then?
It was instant love with this child. And I knew even if things didn't work out, I would always just love this child in a way. But
doesn't take long, does it?
No. The first time I held her, I was like, I just knew I loved her. So, but there's a period of time where the birth mother can relinquish.
Sure, change your mind.
Yep. Yeah. And it just felt like I was holding my breath and waiting to be told, she changed her mind. Yeah. So, but that passed. And
now, how old is your first child at this point?
She was 6 at this, just turned 7. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a busy mom, running around with a 7-year-old, and you get this infant.
Yep.
And the story's not quite over.
Yeah. So we had to stay in that state until the states had communicated.
Yeah.
And so we were living in a hotel with a baby and 2 other children.
And a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Not so easy.
Yep. And my mom was there to help too. And 6 days after she was born, we found out we were pregnant.
Of course you did.
Yes. So at that point, I was like, oh boy. And we were in a different state. I didn't have the medications that I had taken with our other son.
Sure.
And so I was nervous about that. But again, I just gave it to God. And we actually just had that baby here in July. So
yeah.
it's exciting.
So I think listeners are probably sitting on the back of their chair trying to figure this out at this point. But did you know, what were those feelings like in that hotel room, worried about losing an adoptive infant again, because you'd been there before, to find out you were pregnant? Were you fearful? Were you afraid? Was it complete elation? What were those feelings?
It was a mixture of excitement and this isn't okay. They're too close to. This is not how I would have planned it.
Sure.
But definitely excitement.
Well, I guess there's no such thing as unplanned.
Yeah.
So, and then you have an uneventful, I guess it's fair to say, pregnancy. Again, you'd done that before once, and now you have another uneventful one and delivered a beautiful baby.
Yeah.
And I think when we talked about having you come on this episode, I walked in the room and you were giving your adopted infant breast milk from a bottle, having just breastfed your biological infant.
Yes.
And how far apart are they in
They're
age?
8 months apart.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much biologically impossible.
Yeah.
So really you have twins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's just remarkable.
Yeah.
What a great story.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, highs and lows.
Yeah.
And you tell it with such grace as though it was not difficult. Yeah. I happen to know, and listeners have gathered, that you're a woman of faith.
Yeah.
What part did your faith play in all of this journey?
Yeah. I struggled with my faith, if I'm honest, after Austin died, because I couldn't understand why God would let me hurt this much.
Yeah.
And then even through some of the miscarriages, I had faith, but I did want to question why.
Yeah.
Why these things were happening. And I was like, God knows my heart. And I would constantly have that conversation with him. You know me, you know my heart.
Why?
And my dream has always been, because we try to plan things on our own, I wanted my 5 kids by the time I turned 30. And it just wasn't happening. But through it all, my faith got stronger.
Really?
And I really learned to lean on God even more. Even when I thought I had been doing it before, I realized that I wasn't. And then to see it come to fruition, I got my 5th baby before I turned 30.
Wow.
So,
but not in the way that you expected or
not
planned.
at all.
That's
Not
probably
at all.
part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Do you remember maybe in what some would call the dark time, or maybe the lowest times?
Yeah.
Plenty of people, I'm thinking of Mother Teresa, have talked about periods of darkness where it felt like God wasn't present. Do you remember those feelings?
Yeah, sometimes I wondered, where are you?
Yeah.
Why would you let me hurt this bad?
Yeah. And then do you remember something changing?
The biggest thing, I remember I talked to the pastor at church because I was concerned. I didn't want to be in this place where I was angry at God or questioning him. And I was told, find 3 things every day to be thankful for and thank God for those and make them different things every day. And doing that really helped pull me out of that place that I was at.
Yeah. When my wife and I were going through our adoption journey, I found myself doing a lot of fist pounding on the desk. And my wife at the time gave great counsel and said, our God is big enough for you to be angry. Yeah. And I thought, well, it's a good thing because I am. Yeah. And I don't exactly remember it turning the corner. I just know that it turned. Yeah. But I think what you're describing, probably, I've seen that a lot in my career. When it can get so low, people can really turn away. And it's a pivotal moment. You could turn either way and walk away or sort of lean in. And thank God you leaned in.
Yeah.
But That had to be so tough.
Yeah. And it helped too. We had a lot of people praying for us and over us, even though we didn't know it at the time. We were very, very much prayed for, and that helped too.
So, if you're talking to couples that are struggling with infertility and loss, and you've suffered not just loss, but all kinds of loss, how do you speak to them? How do you encourage them to press on, or do you? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's very personal what you decide to do, but if it's in your heart, just keep pushing and talk to people who have been there. I've gone to support groups that were great, that really helped me, and I still go to them. But find resources and talk to people. Just follow your heart.
How do you feel like your husband reacted to all of these things? Was it similar to how you reacted? Was his reaction and path different? What do you think?
I think I was the more emotional. I took it really hard, and I think he did too, although he didn't show it as much. I think he wanted to just be strong for me. Yeah. I think he felt that was his role, and you didn't see the sadness, I guess, as much. Yeah. One thing, after one of the miscarriages, I was just really low, and I just needed him to be there. We didn't really talk. We just sat on the couch and watched a show, but just physically being there with me is what I needed.
Yeah, I find, we men are sort of wired to kill the bear, I say, to attack the threat. Yeah. It's in our DNA. Yeah. And this threat is too big. You can't attack it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times that leaves men feeling helpless. Yeah. And generally speaking, we don't do well with helpless. And so we might tend to just shut down as a response to the feeling of helplessness. Yeah. And then that can be misinterpreted by our spouses or by the community as sort of disengaging and maybe not connecting, not caring, when in reality it isn't. I think a lot of times it's just not knowing what to do, because it's so easy to see this bear's too big. I can't get this one. Yeah. But as you said, just sometimes being physically present. I think too, we're wired to be fixers. Yeah. We can't fix this. Yeah. But it doesn't mean we can't help. Right. And I love the way you said, I just needed him there. He didn't have to say anything brilliant. Yep. Which we're not always great at that. But he was just physically present. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Good. Well, let's continue maybe with this advice theme a bit and focus just on sort of the healthcare part. Because time and again, I encounter families in that second and that third or in that fourth loss. And, the stories that we hear are not always great ones. So how would you advise, another mother that maybe is early on in your journey and struggling? What kind of lessons learned could you share from along the way? Yeah. So with a lot of my losses, I did a lot of research on my own, or I tried to, and I asked a lot of questions. Could it be this? Could it be that? Right. And I was told pretty much no. But I knew that there had to be something. Yeah. So I did end up switching providers. I wanted somebody that stood for the same things I did. And I actually had gotten a call from a friend who was like, have you gone to Fertility and Midwifery Care Center yet? And I was like, no. And I looked you guys up, and then I made the call. But I didn't know what my options were, I guess, at first, until I got that phone call. It's interesting you said that sort of isn't aligned with your beliefs and your approach. And my brain automatically goes to issues of life there. Yeah. But there's a lot of issues, outside of just how you feel about life. And I'm sure you encountered sort of a termination message when you realized that one of your children had an anomaly. But that's not the time, is it, to realize the person across the table doesn't share my values.
Yeah.
And I'm not being judgmental against those providers that don't share patients' values, but that's a tough time to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because you're in the throes of this tragedy,
Yeah.
and you realize all of the sudden this provider is recommending something that's not appropriate for me.
Yeah. When we were asked to terminate with Austin, with that pregnancy, it was a no, and it was never going to be a yes. But we were asked multiple times.
Really?
And it just felt like our decision wasn't being respected. We were still being pushed to terminate.
I mean, I hate to ask the naive question, but do you have a sense of why? Why do you feel like the system, so to speak, was pushing you in that way?
I think it was going to be easier for them, is what they thought, or that her life didn't have value.
Yeah.
And to me, I knew it did.
I mean, I'd like to assume good intent, and I think those people in that position think, honestly, they're helping by saying, we're going to prevent you pain and suffering by ending all of this, so to speak, not fully recognizing how untrue that is.
Yeah.
But again, that's a tough time to be having those kind of conversations. So maybe a takeaway is find healthcare providers that see the world through a similar lens.
Yes.
Or at least, I would say, willing to recognize that you don't see the world through a similar lens, and then respect the other person's vision.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that's missing.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's been an amazing story. It's been an amazing journey. You tell it with such grace and with the heart of a mother. Any final sort of thoughts for moms listening?
Just follow your dream. If you want a big family, just don't give up. Keep trying.
I can't imagine ending it any better than that.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this discussion as much as I know I've enjoyed it. And I even got to participate in part of it, and it's been great hearing it again. Do you have a story that you'd like to share with us, listeners? We'd love to hear it. Shelby's story is a remarkable one, and we know there's a lot of other really remarkable, touching stories out there. You can reach me via email, and we can arrange to have you come on the podcast. We'd love to. It's Dr. Stroud, that's DrStroud, at fertilityandmidwifery.com. You can even message me directly if you'd like to, 260-450-8878. I want to thank you for joining us on All Things Women's Health. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. We'll be back soon with another episode, and I hope you'll join us regularly. Thanks again for listening to All Things Women's Health. I'm Dr. Chris Stroud.